I've been with the St. Louis Park Police Department coming up on 27 years. We have an officer that's assigned to the Southwest Hennepin Drug Task Force, and I did that position for 4 years, from 2011 to 2014, and learned a lot about narcotics. Really on the street, we really don't know anything until you get into a job like this and start seeing what goes on, and it's pretty amazing the lifestyle that these folks live, and it's pretty apparent why they sell the drugs. They make a lot of money from it. And the Southwest Hennepin Drug Task Force was started in 1997. It's run by the Sheriff's Department in Hennepin County, and it's made up of members from each of those cities up there: St. Louis Park, Eden Prairie, Minnetonka, Edina, Hopkins. Supervised by a sergeant from Hennepin County Sheriff's Office, and there's also a sheriff's deputy also in the group. So the drug task force, just like all task forces, so Hennepin County's actually got 4 different task forces. They've got the Southwest, they got the West Metro, they have a VOTF unit which operates out of downtown, and there's actually 2 of those, one on the north side of 394, one on the south side. But there are also drug task forces, obviously, in Anoka County, Carver County, Dakota County, Ramsey County. You have the DEA, the ATF, FBI, ICE, Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. So all these different groups throughout the state of Minnesota are all doing separate investigations on narcotics traffickers and movers of narcotics. And so we do a lot of deconfliction through a website that we have to make sure that nobody's stepping on each other's toes when it comes to investigations. But the last thing you want to do is start an investigation and go in and do a warrant and pull out a load of drugs from somebody else who's been looking at them for a couple of months. So we're real careful about doing that, making sure that we're not doing that. Those groups also assist us, so if we go into other cities, they'll help us. They come into our city, we help them. The hours for the drug task forces vary. Our group typically, we work Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Drug dealers don't work bankers' hours. So, I mean, they work all hours of the day and night. So we would get called out all hours of the day and night, did a lot of overtime. So we would work a 40-hour work week, but we'd sometimes put in 20, 25 hours of overtime. Just because we'd have to come in early, start early, do search warrants. Maybe we'd stay late because we were doing follows or buys. And so things just kind of progress, and when you're working on something, you can't just stop and say, well, I got to go home and go back to my family. So it's a very time-consuming position, very time-consuming job. We are in charge of any drug arrests that occur in the cities that were listed. We go in and interview those subjects, sit down, talk to them, try to convince them why it's in their best interest to work with us as an informant. If they agree to work with us, then we don't charge them. The benefit of them helping us, obviously, is that they know the people out there selling drugs. We don't. So they introduce us and get us into the people who are selling the drugs, the money. Our goal is to take drugs off the street, money, and weapons, handguns, rifles, things of that sort. So we'll interview the people in custody, and we'll tell them, you know, if you can do 2 to 3 cases on two to three different people, felony level cases, and agree to make buys for us, provide us with information on where drugs are held, stored, then we will not charge you. So that's kind of an agreement that they sign up as a CI with the understanding this is what you need to do, and if they do it, we don't charge them. Some of them get arrested several times and they know how the game works, and so they agree right away to become an informant because they know it keeps them out of prison. If we deal with somebody over and over and they become CIs over and over, sometimes they become very good CIs, and we consider them what's called a confidential, reliable informant. Basically, if they give us information, it's pretty much gold. I mean, we can write in our reports. Our CIs, whenever we sign them up, are given a number. So we don't refer to them by sex. We don't refer to any operations that we do by day or hour. We're very vague, and we do that for a reason. That's to protect our informants. But if a CRI gives us information, I mean, it's a good guarantee that the information is going to be spot on, and it's something that we can use in a search warrant, and the judge will sign off and say, this guy's or gal's worked several times in the past, done a lot of good cases. And so a search warrant based off of a CRI's information is a lot better than just a CI. Sometimes CIs will lie to us, so we've got to be real careful with that. If an informant or somebody signs up to be an informant and they don't do what they say they're gonna do, then we'll just take their report and we'll submit it for charging, whether it's the county attorney or if it's a federal US attorney. And for a federal case or a case to get charged federally, we have to have pretty substantial amounts of drugs. We're talking kilos or pounds of cocaine or heroin, things of that sort. So a lot of the stuff that we deal with is a pretty low level. Eventually our goal is to work up the chain, arresting people and try to get up to the big suppliers. You know, a lot of the narcotics that come into our country today come in out of Mexico. And so ultimately, if we get into a case that has that kind of legs, then we get the DEA involved and we end up going and doing a federal case. And the benefit of a federal case versus a state case is they end up going away to prison for a longer period of time. Ultimately, our goal again is to take the drugs off the street, the guns, and the cash, take away their proceeds. We do a lot of surveillance as Drug Task Force investigators, write search warrants, again, to get in, recover the drugs, money, guns. Knock and talks, so we'll do those on an apartment. If somebody calls and says, you know, I smell marijuana coming from this apartment. A smell of marijuana in and of itself is really a petty misdemeanor is smoking marijuana. Somebody who just uses it, it doesn't have a large quantity. So for a petty misdemeanor, you can't get a search warrant, so we'll just go knock on the apartment, find out if they're using or not, if they're smoking it, if they have paraphernalia in there. We have a crime-free multi-housing agreement that all tenants in the city of St. Louis Park sign if they rent an apartment. That if they use drugs or are caught with drugs, that they get evicted from their rental property. So we have a good working relationship with all of our apartment complexes, managers, caretakers. We do trash pulls. We would go out at 2, 3 in the morning. People would put their garbage out to the street for normal collection. And once they put it out on the curb, then it's open for anybody to go over there and take it. And we would go through that garbage in the middle of the night. We'd take it back to our office looking for evidence of drug dealing. We'd look for drug dealer tear-offs. We'd look for user tear-offs, cut off straws, pens that are separated that have powder residue in them, needles, evidence of drug use or dealing. And then based off of that, we would write a search warrant. And then once we get that search warrant signed, we would have 10 days to execute that search warrant. So same thing if we would do a controlled buy. If we would give an informant money and then they would call their source and say, hey, I need to pick up, you know, some drugs, whatever the drug was. We would search the informant first, make sure they didn't have anything. We'd give them the money, put in the call to their source. We would follow them with several surveillance cars to the deal. They would exchange the money and the drugs. We'd record everything. When they come back, we'd take the drugs, field test it to make sure it was actually drugs. And then, so based off of that, we would get a search warrant. Again, we would have 10 days to execute that search warrant. So it's not like we would get the drugs and then go hit them right away. And we do that for a reason. We want to protect the informant's identity. So again, everybody's given a number. Everything's sealed in a file in our office. If it ever comes up in court where defense attorneys challenge the validity of an informant saying that the police made up who they are, I don't think this person exists, then a judge may request that we do what's called an in-camera hearing where we go back to their office in chambers. It'd be just the judge and the narcotics investigator. We'd have to produce the file, which has the CI's picture, criminal history, driver license information, and then the judge can come back and tell the defense attorney, I'm satisfied that this informant exists. Keeps them from going in and having to testify. So we do canine sniffs. We have dogs, obviously, that are trained in smelling marijuana, heroin, cocaine, methamphetamine. They're not trained in prescription pills. They're not trained in all of the different, there are so many drugs out there that you can buy on the internet. You know, there's the knockoff marijuana that we were kind of talking about a little bit. There's other drugs that are out there that you can buy, synthetic drugs. They're not trained in that. So it's the main drugs that we have the canines trained in. And so we'll run those by cars and apartments and get search warrants based off of the alert made by the canine. Controlled buys, like I talked about, and then presentations like I'm doing here. We do that a lot with the schools, with our crime-free multi-housing, you know, the managers, caretakers, kind of letting them know. And I'll have slides here showing the different drugs and paraphernalia and whatnot. So if you guys have any questions as we go along, just let me know, raise your hand, and I'll be happy to answer them as best I can. How a case starts, we get calls from citizens, short-term traffic, people all hours of the day and night coming and going. Maybe they physically saw drugs in somebody's hand. A lot of people coming in and out, or maybe the smell of narcotics. Marijuana has a very identifiable pungent smell. Methamphetamine, when that's smoked, has a very distinct smell. Cocaine smells like cat urine, smells like a litter box. So if we go into a house and we're doing a search warrant, we can smell what smells like cat urine or litter boxes, and there's no cats. We have a pretty good indication that there's somewhere hidden cocaine, and we'll start tearing in looking for it. So, and then confidential informants. We'd have them do buys from their sources. We would have informants actually introduce an undercover officer sometimes, so that we could go in and actually buy the drugs directly from the suppliers instead of having the informants go in and do it. The head of the county sheriff's office was kind of funny about that. They would rather have the informants go in and do it because they're more comfortable with the people that they know versus introducing an undercover officer. It's a dangerous game. They all carry guns for the most part. They're worried about getting ripped off by other drug dealers. They're worried about going to prison because the police will arrest them or do a search warrant and come and take their stuff. So it was always just a lot easier and cleaner to use an informant. So drug identification, marijuana is the most frequently used illicit drug in the world today. Of 120 chemicals found in marijuana, half of them are cancer causing. That's the big push for the federal government not to legalize marijuana. They're saying, they'll argue that there are some benefits from the THC in the marijuana as far as medical goes, calming people's nerves, glaucoma, different reasons like that. The problem is that they also cause cancer. So the government won't sign off on it federally because of that reason. It's more of a health risk than it is a reward because there's other drugs that they can use to treat those things. And so they don't recognize marijuana for that reason. With that being said, different states have obviously legalized it and allow it to go on in their states. Marijuana, typically when it's packaged, is going to be wrapped in cellophane just like there on the left. They're going to come in bricks, and they're usually sold in pound bricks. On the right side, you can see it's a green leafy substance. You see the seeds there on the bottom left. It can be green, or it can be brown, or it could be a mixture of green and brown, just depends. There's a close-up, you can see that it's more brown on the bottom left. So you got your plant that comes out of the stem or the root of the tree or the plant. And once they're done growing it, they'll harvest it by pulling it out of the dirt. They'll hang it upside down, dry it out, let it dry out till all the leaves shrivel up. And then they'll shake all the seeds off of it, and then they'll go in and remove all the stems and whatnot from the actual leaf part of the plant and use it for smoking. Different things that they'll smoke marijuana in. You got your pipes, you got rolling papers, one-hitters, whatever you can put, kind of like cigars or cigarettes. They'll put it in blunts, they call them, where they'll put them inside of cigars, Swisher Sweets. So if you see somebody with Swisher Sweets, they may or may not just be smoking Swisher Sweets. They could be including marijuana in with that. And the benefit to putting it into cigars is the smell kind of masks it a little bit, and it makes it harder to smell the marijuana. You can still smell it, but it just makes it more difficult. This is a marijuana grow that was taken down out in the West Metro. You can see there are several plants there. Every one of those plants, when they're mature, will yield about a pound of marijuana. And a pound of marijuana, you'll see here in a little bit, the prices kind of fluctuate, and it's market-based, just like anything else in economics, supply and demand. So we know if we're doing a good job out there taking drugs out the street, because we'll see prices skyrocket. If prices are really low, then we know that the market's saturated with drugs. So that's kind of how we know if we're doing a good job out there or not, is by the prices that we're paying for these drugs. Cocaine comes in different forms. Powder, it's usually white. Comes in rock form also, called crack cocaine. Crack cocaine was big back in the 80s. It's kind of gone away from the whole crack cocaine thing. The reason why crack became popular is they would take cocaine and they realized that if they would cut it with baking soda and put it in a microwave and they'd mix it with some water, they could make crack cocaine into a hard form and then bust it up into little rocks and then sell each of those rocks for $10, $15, $20 a piece and make more money off of a kilo of cocaine than they could just selling it as a powder. So, and people, it's very addictive. So when people smoke crack cocaine, one time they're hooked. It's kind of like methamphetamines like that. Very, very addictive, very hard to kick the habit.
Only with crack cocaine, not with regular cocaine?
Regular cocaine's not, I mean, it's addictive if people use it over and over. The problem with drugs is when you use something, you gotta use it more and more to maintain that high, so you build up a tolerance. So, you can, with repeated use of cocaine powder, you can get addicted to it and it's hard to get off. You gotta go through treatment, but crack cocaine, it's like you smoke it once and you're immediately hooked. Whereas powder cocaine, you can sniff it once and probably leave it alone if you never want to do it again. But yeah, I mean, you can build up a tolerance. Cocaine, so this would be 1/10 of a gram in a folded up bill. So oftentimes when we arrest people at the police department, this is how we'll find it, either in a dollar bill or a piece of paper that's folded up, maybe stuck in a cigarette pack. I mean, there's many ways they can hide it. There's containers. You can see their crack cocaine in the little Ziploc baggie that he's got in his hand there, and on the bill. Each one of those little rock of cocaine, then they put it in a pipe with a piece of copper wool on the end of it, and that keeps it from sucking into their lungs when they inhale it and light it up, so that they can inhale the fumes. But crack cocaine, we really don't see a whole lot of that today. We still do occasionally, but not like we used to back in the 80s. So it's kind of, the popularity has really gone down, and the reason why is because of methamphetamine. Methamphetamine, when it came into the market, kind of replaced crack cocaine. So besides the folded up bills, tin foil, you can see they'd put it in, the different vials and containers that they'll put it in, little Ziploc bags. We have testers at the police department, we have daubers, we have packs that we can field test drugs, narcotics, to see if they're drugs. But ultimately, if we're gonna charge somebody, it has to be sent off to the BCA lab, and we have to actually get a chemist report to show what exactly is in the powder or in the container or wrapper or whatever, just so that we can say that this is what they're being charged for. So we've been finding a lot in the last couple of years. Heroin, cocaine also, are being mixed with fentanyl and carfentanil, which are very deadly. Very small trace amounts are used to take down large animals like rhinoceroses, elephants. So you can about imagine what a small trace amount can do to a human being. Because of that, we're seeing a lot of heroin death overdoses because of the carfentanil and the fentanyl. They are very dangerous. For us, from a law enforcement standpoint, we can't look at a powder and tell you if it's got fentanyl or carfentanil in it. It has to be sent to the BCA lab. So I can't show you a picture and say this is what it looks like. Go ahead.
Why would they do that? Because a lot of times when they cut with something, it's to make it seem like more
Right.
than what it is. But if that's not doing it, like what would be the positive reason for them to cut it with such a dangerous substance?
Right, so what they do is she's right, they'll take, heroin, they'll take cocaine, and then they'll cut it with another product so that they can double their product and sell more and make more profit. With the fentanyl and the carfentanil, it is a lot more potent than heroin is. And so instead of doing pure, they figure if they just do a little trace amount and mix it with the heroin or the cocaine, it's gonna give them the higher rush, or the better feeling, the more euphoric feeling that heroin gives them, versus just the heroin. So it gives them 50 times that high, and that's why they're using it. And people know it's dangerous, and they have no idea when they're buying these drugs on the street what it's cut with, because they don't tell them. And so they're injecting it thinking they're getting heroin, or they just don't care. The problem, and we'll go into heroin a little bit, but heroin is a physically addicting drug where they get sick, violently ill, they'll feel like they got the flu, only 10 times worse. Whereas methamphetamine, cocaine addiction, those are more psychological. They're not so much physical as they are psychological. Okay, it's like smoking cigarettes. You just gotta, it's hard to quit any drug, don't get me wrong, but when it comes to heroin, it's a physical, it makes them sick if they don't have that fix and keep that fix coming. So, but yeah, this carfentanil and fentanyl is huge right now. This is a case that before I went in there in 2011, the person that preceded me, Officer Reavers, they worked a case that started in St. Louis Park from a traffic stop. The guy, when he got out of the car, dropped a little baggie of cocaine on the ground. And when they debriefed him as a CI and he agreed to work, said that he could buy from a guy. They ended up arresting that guy. And that guy, when they debriefed him, said that he can get 10 for the task force. And so they were thinking 10 ounces of cocaine. And he was telling them, no, I'll get you 10 kilos. And so they didn't believe him. They were pretty skeptical because this guy just didn't seem like he could produce that kind of weight. But he called up his Mexican source for the cocaine and ordered 10 kilos. And they did a deal down in Bloomington in a parking lot down there. And the car showed up. Guy gets out of the trunk, or gets out, opens up the trunk, and takes a big duffel bag out of the back, throws it in the back seat of the informant's car. And then when the guy left, the surveillance officers followed him to see where he went to. And they went and met with the CI, and sure enough, there was 10 kilos in there. So they waited for a little bit, and they had the informant call the source back again because he had sent a runner. It wasn't the source that actually came out. They have somebody that will actually mule the drugs for them. So he calls the source again and says, hey, where's your guy at? I've been waiting, and he hasn't shown up. And so he was beside himself because he thought he got ripped off. He thought that his runner must have took his 10 kilos. And so he said, I'll personally bring it. So he, the source of the cocaine, actually brought another 10 kilos of cocaine and showed up. And as a result of that investigation, our guys, our task force, didn't sleep for 3 days. For 3 days, this case just kept going, snowballing. They ended up doing several search warrants, making several arrests, recovered 27 kilos of cocaine, $360,000 I think it was, and then they got 7 handguns out of the different areas where they did these search warrants. So that was kind of an unusual case to get that kind of product off of just a traffic stop. But it does happen. So when we work with informants, we just never know how it's going to go. And I mean, this is like a once in a career thing that happens here. And Officer Reavers, that was part of the task force, it was his 3rd time around in the task force. So he had done it 2 other times. So he knew how to do what he did well. And that was a really good case. They ended up getting indicted. There were several of them that ended up going to federal prison. And as you can about imagine how much time they got a lot of years. So, methamphetamine, it's a chemical, it's a synthesized drug. Synthesized drug just means that it's man-made. It doesn't grow naturally, so it's got to be made. It was first made in 1919 by a Japanese chemist. During World War II, the US, Germany, Russia, and Japan all experimented with methamphetamine and amphetamine, giving it to servicemen. And the reason why they did that is they wanted to keep them awake and alert. And that's what methamphetamine does. Keeps you up all night long, keeps you focused and paying attention. And they figured that they could fight longer, protect their camps, and that's why they started giving it to the military guys. It was later popularized by the biker culture for the same reason. They would stay up all night and party and just be able to go forever. Now it's manufactured and distributed largely by the Mexican national organization similar to the Colombian cartels. And the reason why that is, obviously, the precursors to make methamphetamine, the cold tablets, the legislature has made it almost impossible for anybody in the United States to get large enough quantities to be able to make what's needed to produce large amounts of methamphetamine. Down in Mexico, they don't have that kind of legislation or oversight where they can't get it. So they get all those pills and they just manufacture it by the pounds and then ship it into the United States and all over the world. So just like the cocaine, the methamphetamine comes out of Mexico. Tweaker lifestyle, it's repeated drug use and abuse, lack of responsibility for self and kids, lack of respect for others and environment. They commit crimes, obviously, to get the money to be able to afford the drugs because they gotta keep getting that high. It's kind of like the tolerance thing we were talking about. They build up tolerance, so they need more so that they get that feeling. We find a lot of women get sexually abused and used in exchange for the methamphetamine. People will commit other crimes so that they can get the money. Very violent and destructive antisocial behavior. They're kind of their way of living is live fast, die fast. I mean, it's just kind of the way it goes. You're either gonna die or they're gonna end up in prison. So methamphetamine comes in two different forms. It comes in glass shards, which is kind of on the left here. You'll see it looks like glass, little chunks of glass. Or you have the powder, which basically is the glass just ground up into a powder form. The difference, with the right side there, you can use a straw and you can snort it, whereas the glass shards, you would put them into a pipe and smoke them out of a bowl pipe, where you would heat it up and then it turns into a vapor and then they inhale that. These are snack Ziploc baggies. Each one of those is an ounce of methamphetamine, as recovered during the search warrant. And again, an ounce of methamphetamine, I couldn't tell you what it is on the street today because I've been out of it for a few years now, but back when I was working, $1,200 to $1,700 an ounce, just for an ounce. So it was, to get a pound of methamphetamine back there was $20,000 to $25,000. The pipes here on the left, those are methamphetamine smoking pipes. So if you got a glass pipe with a bowl on the end of it, you know that they're using it to smoke methamphetamine. If they're smoking crack cocaine, it's going to be a glass pipe. It's going to be straight with no bowl on the end, and usually it's going to have that copper wool in the end of it, which is where they put the crack cocaine so that they don't inhale it when they light it up. "10 years of meth use." Gal up in the top left, that's what she looked like before the meth started. And by time 10 years later, you can see what happened. Teeth are gone. Just face starts to get shrunk. They lose weight. They're up all the time, not eating properly. This gentleman here, you can see on the left, normal, right side, he's got scabs all over his face, open sores. They'll get them on their arms, you'll see on the next slide. The reason why they get these scabs and these sores, if you ever take a cold pill for your cold, you'll start to feel kind of anxious and jittery, and you'll scratch, you'll feel like you got bugs crawling on you. That's the way these guys feel when they use methamphetamine. They feel like they got bugs crawling on them, so they'll start scratching. And then they'll get scabs, and then they'll scratch the scabs off, and they get bigger. That's pretty common to see that with somebody who's using a lot of methamphetamine. You start seeing the open sores in the arms and the face. Good indication that they might be meth users. You see the arms, the open sores, teeth from smoking methamphetamine. And you'll see in a minute here the chemicals that are used to make meth, why it would do that to their teeth. These are the chemicals that are used to make methamphetamine. We used to find, before they instilled the laws making it difficult to get the cold tablets, when they would make their own methamphetamine, these are the chemicals that we would find that they would use to make the methamphetamine. And they'd find out how to do it on the internet, just like everything. You get all that great information out there. And they'll put it in pop bottles, and they use batteries, matchbook heads. They'll use these different chemicals, and they have a certain order in which they mix these chemicals up. And they put them through a coffee filter to get all the liquid off, which leaves behind the residue, which in turn is the methamphetamine. So these chemicals that are used to produce the methamphetamine, all those chemicals together through that process changes the chemical structure. The chemical structure, that is what makes it illegal, because our legislature says it's a dangerous drug, it's illegal to possess. We were talking earlier about synthetic drugs that you can buy off the internet. There's many things out there we can buy off the internet that are not currently illegal, but once the legislature catches up to it, they make it illegal based on the formula makeup of the item. So the legislatures always have this cat and mouse game when it comes to these synthetic drugs, because they'll buy them off the internet. They may not be illegal today, but 6 months, a year down the road, they will be, because they'll make laws and put it in the list of chemicals that are illegal. So it's a constant battle that we're running with the synthetic drugs, and there's a ton of them out there. Powders, pills, liquids. I mean, I couldn't even begin to show you all the different pictures and stuff of different things, because they're all different. Dangers to law enforcement. You can see him wearing the hazmat suit, he's got a rebreather. When it comes to manufacturing methamphetamine, LSD is another synthesized drug. It's man-made, using chemicals. They're highly volatile, very explosive.